Gianno Caldwell is a sometime colleague of mine. He's a Fox News political analyst. He has some other jobs. He's founder of the Caldwell Strategic Consulting Firm, headquartered in D.C. I'll ask him if that makes him part of the swamp. Also special correspondent in Extra, and he writes for The Hill. Very well-rounded guy. Gianno, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Well, thank you, and we can't forget about my newest title, my new book, Taken for Granted, How Conservatism Can Win Back the Americans That Liberalism Failed, out today. I encourage everyone to buy it wherever books are sold, any national retailers.
Gianno Caldwell's Taken for Granted. Taken for Granted is the new book, available Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Play. Well, congratulations on that. Is that your first book, Gianno?
It is my first book, but certainly won't be my last.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I like that attitude. So you come from South Chicago. You had a tough childhood. Chicago plagued by the kind of violence I was talking about in Cleveland. What's the solution? Before I get to the solution, is the problem that the old line Democratic municipal governments just don't get it? Is the problem the way people respond to aggressive policing, like stop and frisk? Is stop and frisk the answer? What do you think of Michael Bloomberg? Big question, Gianno.
Yeah, a lot of big questions there. I answer a number of these questions in my book, Taken for Granted, How Conservatism Can Win Back the Americans That Liberalism Failed. Liberals have failed the people of Chicago. They've failed America, to be honest, whether you be on the south side of Chicago or in the Appalachian region and you be poor white. They failed. And truthfully speaking, when we're thinking about Chicago, to be much more specific, we think about the 2,400 people that have been shot this year, including seven shot just yesterday. The numerous people that are shot, and these policies in which liberals try to use to combat the violence, like gun control. Chicago has had the most comprehensive gun control laws on the books. They failed because I don't think they realize it, but criminals don't believe in obeying the law. So thinking about my story and the reason I wrote this book, I grew up extremely poor on the south side of Chicago, lights, gas, and water off at the same time, mom addicted to crack cocaine. I found a life of opportunity once I really discovered the conservative movement and began to identify the distinctions between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I saw that there were far more opportunity within the Republican Party than there was in the Democratic Party, which is all about control.
Gianno Caldwell, my guest, Taken for Granted, his brand new book, his first book, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Play. Do you believe that someone like Michael Bloomberg, who was a Republican, or more specifically, the tactics used by Michael Bloomberg, building on what Mayor Giuliani had done in New York with stop and frisk, is that the answer, something like that, aggressive policing?
If I'm thinking about Chicago, and I got to tell you, I did recently, if people want to go check it out, I have a documentary on Fox Nation that's out today. It's called The New Battle for Chicago. And in it, I went and spoke with a lot of different individuals. I talk about this in my book, actually, Taken for Granted. Interviewed gang members, people who are perpetrating the violence, victims of the violence, law enforcement, teachers, etc. And there's so much hopelessness in the city of Chicago. And my mantra is, it's time to start snitching. It's time to start working with the police because back in the day when I was growing up, if you were talking to the police and you told on people, you could be hurt and murdered or something can happen to your family. But now, if you don't talk to the police and you cannot be involved in a life, something can happen to your family. It could be fairly problematic for you. So we might as well work with the police. And I think at this point, the people of Chicago are desperate for something that could potentially stop the violence. Maybe that's stop and frisk. Maybe it's not. There's always going to be people who are against it, but they're desperate for change, and they're desperate for a true reduction in the violence. Not, there's 50 or 60 or whatever, how many, less murders, but we still clocking 400 and 500 murders a year. That's not a drastic change. We need drastic change in the city of Chicago, and we need it now.
Why do so many African Americans remain loyal to the Democratic Party that has failed them in so many ways, particularly in the urban municipal setting?
Well, let me flip the question, and I talk about it in my book, Taken for Granted, How Conservatism Can Win Back the Americans Liberalism Failed. I know a lot of people have issues with some of President Trump's rhetoric and some of his actions on Twitter. I know that I don't agree with everything he says or does, but this is what I can say. For every African American in the United States right now, President Trump, in my opinion, has been the most impactful president in my lifetime from a policy standpoint. We look at the First Step Act. You talk about thousands of people released from jail, 90% of them being African American. Talk about opportunity zones, 9,000 of them, mostly in African American communities where there's poor folks. Talk about jail reform. We can talk about the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans. I do believe that people are legitimately waking up. I think that started in 2016 when President Trump ran, and they said that he would get a 0% black support, and you saw that he got 8% of African American.
So does he beat 8% this time?
Well, no, I believe so. I think at the end of the day, I know that there are people who have questions about his rhetoric. My consideration is more around the policy, because Democrats have had some of the best rhetoric for African Americans since anyone could remember. But what changed in black folks' lives? If you were an African American man in Chicago between the ages of 20 and 24, 47% of you were unemployed or out of school. So what good is nice words do for people who are hurting and unemployed and poor?
So how do you, Gianno Caldwell, author of Taken for Granted, how do you deal with the criticism? How dare you support Donald Trump? You're supporting a racist. You're supporting a man whose language is so divisive and ugly, et cetera, et cetera. How do you deal with it?
So first and foremost, President Trump is the president of all America, and I support the president no matter who that person is. I may not agree with what is said at the time, whether it be Barack Obama, Donald Trump, or whoever else. But what I can tell you is this president, and I stand by every word, his policy has been beneficial for this entire country. He's brought back manufacturing, which the liberals said that would never be brought back. I talk about that in my book, Taken for Granted, how conservatism can win back the Americans that liberalism failed. He's brought back so many areas. He's bringing companies back to the country. And people who continue to bash the president without offering anything of substance are the ones who are really losing the heart and soul of this country. We want to be nice people, and we want the president to speak nicely and, of course, have nice things to say on Twitter. But I think more important than anything else is what does the policy look like? And I think he's winning on all fronts from a policy perspective.
Gianno Caldwell, associate of mine at Fox News, Taken for Granted, the new book out today. Congratulations with it, man. I really appreciate you coming on. I obviously endorse your point of view, and I think that it represents hope. Hope. You got to have hope. You have to have a feeling that tomorrow's going to be better than the next day, and not this nihilistic.
And I thank you for always speaking up, because you don't always agree with what President Trump says, and you're vocal when you don't. And I would ask everyone to follow me on social media at Gianno Caldwell, and of course pick up the book out today, Taken for Granted: How Conservatism Can Win Back the Americans That Liberalism Failed. Thank you so much.
Good luck with it, man. Good luck with it. Thank you again.
Thank you.